Okay, what a busy day we've had so far, but we're not done yet. In fact, if it depends on me, we will not be done until we get electrification fully into Africa. What is your goal? So I want you to find out. Today, we are speaking to World Bank Senior Director for Energy and Extractive, Mr. Ricardo Politi. So, good morning, Ricardo, or good afternoon. So, how are you doing?
Good afternoon, Tony. First of all, I'm doing very well. I mean, it is a real pleasure to be here, and we are in the middle of the annual meeting, but I think this discussion is really key. So it's very good to have it. Electrification in Africa is an issue that is very, very close to our heart, and especially to my heart, because albeit the average is 47%, which already means that 53 people out of 100 do not have access to electricity. I have to say the picture is very uneven. You go, as you know very well, probably from South Africa with an 86% electrification rate, to countries like Senegal with around 73%, and so on and so forth. And then you go to countries like Central African Republic with 15%. The differences are not only country to country, but they are also between urban areas and rural areas. Just to make an example, because I was in this meeting a few minutes ago, in Senegal, the average electrification rate is 70%, but it is very uneven, with a 95% in the cities and around 40% or 38% in the rural areas. So you can see that it is a major issue. The World Bank is aware of that, and we actually we lend pretty much a lot of money every year, around $2.5 billion for electrification projects of all shape and kind. Of course, electrification can take place on grid and off grid. The picture is very different country to country, depending on how the population density is big. But in general, we believe that electrification can be achieved by investing 57% of resources on grid and 43% off grid. I repeat, then the picture is very different country to country. What we try to do on our side, we try to work very much with governments in order to have very clear electrification plans that take into account least cost, and that, of course, take into account rural electrification as well as the densification of the grid within urban or peri-urban areas. Of course, we are big believers in technology. We do believe that technology is the way forward, and of course, we are very happy with the price of photovoltaic solar energy being very, very low for installment, and in that way, we can really help rural areas to get nano grid, mini grid, or standalone systems, but that allow people to have electricity, which is very, very, very important indeed. I think that if I may conclude, maybe it is really in the context of COVID where we found out how important electricity is. Think about the need for electricity in clinics, in schools, in health facilities. Think about the food chain. How can you transport food if you cannot refrigerate it? And by the way, you have to transport drugs as well. Hopefully, at a certain point, very soon, we will have a vaccine. The vaccine will have to be transported, and it will have to be frozen, of course. So you see how important it is, all this, and how important is electricity to digital. We want Africa to be as digital as possible, but we need the electricity to do so. So this is really something we have concentrated a lot of our resources, and you will see that year after year, we really increase the amount of our lending as well as the amount of our policy dialogue.
Excellent, Ricardo. So I'd like to say that last year in July, you assumed the role of Regional Director for Infrastructure for Africa. So that's why you're able to provide such extensive responses and sharing what the World Bank is doing to make sure that we can move toward the universal goal of full access by 2030. So one thing people have been saying, and it's also true because as an African, I know that. So we have enormous renewable sources, maybe the biggest potential. We have solar, wind, and all of that, and we can harness that cheaply. That's what we think. But for some reason, we still have the cost of electricity, which is the highest in Africa. So I
Okay.
want to know. So because you run a team of 400 people, right? You have a large budget. So what is the bank doing to support the transition towards more affordable, powerful African citizens?
Tony, it is a very good question. I cannot deny it is a very good question indeed. Africa is very well endowed in terms of energy. Think about renewables, think about solar, think about wind, both onshore and offshore, think about geothermal. For example, in Eastern Africa, I'm thinking about Ethiopia now. Think about the huge hydrological endowment that the continent has. Of course, we are talking about a huge continent. I cannot deny I'm a little bit in love with Africa. It's a huge continent. I mean, people do not realize that you can fit Europe probably 8, 9 times in the African continent. It's a huge continent. So of course the picture is different from place to place. For us, in accordance with the SDG 7, we are very much supportive of the energy transition for two reasons. One is certainly the fact that we think that clean energy is important for everybody, and it is a right for everybody at the end to have the cleaner energy possible. The second point is because these are all resources that are already in the continent. So there is no problem to import them, to pay with hard currencies, to have all kinds of security issues. Because I do acknowledge and support that the SDG 7 says very clearly, energy must be secure, must be clean, must be reliable, and must be affordable, which is the other very important point, because having electricity that people cannot afford, I think is a useless exercise. So what I would like to say is that we support very much the renewable sources, very, very, very much indeed. And we are also helped, I have to say, by the technology, as I said a few minutes ago, about solar, wind, geothermal, but also the use of batteries in order to solve the issue of intermittency. Where are the issues, as you rightly pointed out? The issues are often in the legal and regulatory framework in many countries, where you have tariffs that are not cost reflective. So the tariffs do not reflect the cost of generating electricity, and this makes the little by little the level of investments go down, the infrastructure deteriorates because not enough money is put there, but there is not enough money received. That's one of the points. One of the other point is about the utilities in the sector that often are in a non-sustainable financial situation. So as such, they cannot fulfill their mandate to provide clean, secure, and affordable energy. We found another problem is the lack of planning. The energy sector is a complex sector where actually you have to make decisions that will impact the whole population 20, 30 years down the line with the knowledge that you have nowadays. Who would have thought 30 years ago that the price of solar would have been so cheap? So it is very difficult I have to say, I have a lot of sympathy for planners. But again, planning is necessary. And I would like to say the last issue that I found could be solved better, and actually we are working on that, we have projects on that, is the issue of regional integration. Because you see, what you find in a beautiful continent like Africa, what you find is that several countries have several kinds of endowment. There are countries where you have hydro, others countries where you have gas, offshore, onshore, country where solar is better, and in others where wind is better, and so on and so forth. So if we are able to integrate all these regions, I'm not talking about countries, but about regions, what we're going to have electricity, which is actually cheaper because we will go towards the cheaper form of electricity, cleaner because we will try as much as possible to go towards the cleaner form of electricity, and it will be more secure because if hydro, for example, has a problem of drought that we have had in the past, well, you can have solar or natural gas. If sometimes there are dust storms that last a few days, especially in the Sahel, but if you can access electricity coming from the cost, being gas or being hydro or being solar, you can compensate that. So regional integration is key for the future development of Africa. So I would say the utilities, regional integration, and planning.
Excellent. So that's a response I'm sure many people will appreciate. Now, we are all going through a black swan event that the world has been seeing since the beginning of the year. So I'm obviously talking about COVID-19. Who doesn't know the name? Everybody. So COVID-19 has had many impacts. As you were talking about the utility, the way they deliver service to the customer has been completely changed. And because you have such a broad view, because I would like to remind people that you, prior to working with the World Bank, you were working with EBRD as a managing director, still in energy and extractive. So your whole career is around energy and extractive. So you have a very good vision on that. So what do you think the impact is on the utility side from the financial and operational for their performance? What is the impact of COVID they are seeing? And what is to you the path ahead?
I have to say the impact of COVID that you rightly called the black swan. I mean, it was nobody of us would have expected this. To be perfectly honest, it really created havoc in the life of all the people and companies of the world. This is undeniable. But I have to say, in the case of Africa in general, I repeat, the continent is so big, so different. But it has been, if you want, a problem that already existed. I mean, most of the power utilities have the characteristic of being run in a very average way, without proper attention, for example, to losses, technical losses, non-technical losses. The sector, as well, as we were saying a few minutes ago, planning is not done very well. So basically, you have a lot of government working with the utilities, putting their influence on the utilities, but not often is the right kind of influence, which is a little bit the visionary one, the planning one. It is just a public sector interference in a company. So I would say that the problem with the utilities are quite important, and it is a real problem. It is a problem because of what we just discussed, the provision of a secure, reliable, and affordable energy. But there is also the point that if we want to solve the issue of access, if we want Africa to have very competitive prices of energy so that it can develop the huge potential for manufacturing, we also need the private sector to come. We need private companies to arrive, to provide not only generation, as it has been done so far, but also distribution, for example, and sometimes I suppose also transmission, even though I tend to believe transmission is a little bit more complex. And but in order to do that, they have to be sure that they can have an adequate level of return, and they need to be sure that they are going to be paid. Usually in the past, we've used utilities as off-takers. I would say that nowadays this is more difficult to use because the utilities, they have their own problem. As off-takers, they don't reach that level of creditworthiness which is necessary. I would like also to say this: when the private sector can, and what I would like to see as well, is a fair risk sharing. So I have to say, risk must be given to who is better to deal with that risk. Sometimes it's public, and sometimes it's private as well. For me, I think my experience and before in international banking, in private banking, has always been that the best deals are the deals that are fair. Mm-hmm. The deals that are fair usually are not renegotiated during the 20, 30 years of their life, or they are renegotiated in small things here and there. Deals that are born, I have to say, with some kind of unfair risk sharing, usually they tend to be renegotiated. And this is always a very difficult process. So I have to say, it's very important to design the right deal, to have the right credit, the right and credit-worthy off-taker. And we go back to the matter of the utilities. And it is our duty to try and help as much as possible the utility to deal with their technical problems sometimes and with the issues that come from energy sectors that are not reformed enough. So they are not open and transparent enough. And that, of course, the price of it is usually paid by the utility.
So, Ricardo, I'd like to say that was just a short and sweet conversation that we wanted to have with you. We are grateful to have you on our platform here at AEF. We're very much hoping that you're going to come back in future years to tell us more about what the World Bank is doing, the fantastic work that you've been achieving so far. And it was a great pleasure, and I can only wish you a very successful day ahead.
Yeah, Tommy, thank you, and I look forward to coming back.